Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Furlong, and today we're going to talk speciation. Many people wonder if evolution occurs, then how do new species really form? That's what we're going to talk about today. This is known as speciation, the formation of new species. Now, of course, these species are coming from old species. Before we start talking about how this can happen, though, we need to get a definition of exactly what is a species. So a species is defined as a group of similar organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring under natural conditions. So in other words, what this is saying is that they would have to be able to mate, and those offspring that they mate would also have to be able to mate as well. Sometimes all these conditions are not met, and if they're not met, then they would be considered different species. In order for speciation to occur, however, somehow the gene pool has to become isolated from the rest of the population. So that's what we're going to talk about, is how can that gene pool become isolated? There's really 5 types of isolation. The first one is called geographical. Here, species are separated by some geographical feature. Now this could be a mountain range, it could be an ocean, but it could be something small like a road, for instance. Let me give you an example. Here are 2 species of squirrels. Now they are found on either side of the Grand Canyon. We have the kabob squirrel and the Abert squirrel. Now take a close look at them. They have many similar features to one another, but they don't look exactly alike. You see, they have been separated by the formation of the Grand Canyon, and now, because they live on separate sides of the canyon, they never intermix with one another. What's interesting is when scientists try to put them together, they won't mate with each other. They have now become 2 separate species. The second type of isolation is called ecological isolation. Here, species might start living in different environments for a variety of reasons, and because they live in a new environment, they start to develop different characteristics. A good example of this are polar bears. Polar bears are an offshoot of the grizzly bear. But there are certain traits that are better in the Arctic than there are in some of those warmer areas. The big difference you can see is that the color of the fur. So most likely a group of grizzly bears started moving into the colder climate, and organisms with better variations had a greater chance of surviving. Now we see after tens of thousands of years that there are 2 separate species. Now it is certainly possible for a polar bear and a grizzly bear to mate and produce some offspring. This has been done in zoos, for instance, and has even happened a couple of times in nature, but it happens so rarely that they are considered 2 separate species. The third type of isolation is called behavioral isolation. Here, the mating patterns become different so that they no longer mate. So, for instance, here we see 2 birds. They look very similar to one another. One is the western meadowlark and the other is the eastern meadowlark. They live on opposite sides of the country. Because of changing ecosystems, their range started spreading. Now there's areas where the western and the eastern meadowlark overlap, but they don't mate with one another. They have different behavioral patterns. So for instance, with these birds, when the male is singing to attract a female, the eastern meadowlark song doesn't attract a western meadowlark female. And so they never mate. The western meadowlark females are looking for a particular song that only the western meadowlark males are singing. And because of this, their gene pools have become isolated, and now they are 2 different species. Another example of this is the satin bowerbird and the McGregor bowerbird. 2 very similar species, but if you take a look at the satin bowerbird, notice its blue coloration. See, the females really like the color blue. So the males, when they build their nest, and this is one of those types of birds that builds their nest on the ground, the males will fly around and try to find anything that's blue. Blue pieces of paper, blue pieces of trash, whatever it is, take it back and they weave it into their nests. Whereas the McGregor bowerbirds, they're looking for things that are more grayish in color. But then to attract the female, they start singing and they do a little dance around their nest that they made, trying to impress the female. Well, the McGregor bowerbird females are not impressed by the satin bowerbird's nest. And the satin bowerbird's females are not impressed by the McGregor bowerbird male nest. And so they never reproduce with one another. They are separate species. And it's all based on the behaviors that they have. Another type of isolation is temporal isolation. So this is when mating occurs at different times of the year. So an example of this is sweet vernal grass. And so here's a picture of sweet vernal grass. This is found in the mountains of Kentucky and West Virginia. And because of mine waste from the coal mines that contaminated some of the soil, so the grass could not grow in that contaminated soil. Well, because of variations, there were, when the seeds were spread by the wind, some of those seeds landing in that contaminated soil, that they were able to grow. And over time, the seeds that they produced were also able to grow in that contaminated soil. But something interesting happened. The time of the year in which the seeds are produced started to change. So we have one type of grass that goes to seed in one month, another type that goes to seed in another. And because of that, there's no cross-pollination between these two types of grasses. So now what we have are two separate species of grass. And the last type is mechanical isolation. Here there is a difference in the number of chromosomes that prevent mating. So here are two flowers. They look very similar to one another. But one flower has twice the number of chromosomes as the other. Because of this, the pollen of one flower cannot fertilize the eggs of the other. And so pollination never takes place, even though these might be two flowers in the same ecosystem. Because they can't cross-pollinate, they are now two different species. And so you can see it all comes down to isolating that gene pool. If enough differences occur where the species don't mate, we can now consider them as a different species. So I hope that made sense to you, and I will see you in class.